There's a song I sing to myself when I'm going down a ski slope and I think I'm gonna die. Thinking of the only song I could think of was about All right, so hello everyone and welcome. I appreciate you coming. It is 11:30 and 13 seconds and I'm a project manager, so I'm supposed to tell you that I start exactly on time and we're going to get going. So some more folks may roll in, but we're going to rock and roll. I appreciate you being here. So I'm a project manager at Possible Mobile. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Possible Mobile. We make native iOS and Android apps for a lot of big clients in a lot of different industries. And I get to work with a lot of the awesome people and teams there. And there's a lot of things that we do to have great teams. There's certain things that are very unique about teams. They're different from just working by yourself. And I wanted to share some of those things with you today. So I hope you find some of it interesting. I look forward to your questions. We'll have some time at the end, or if you just don't understand something or just want some clarification as I'm going through it, raise your hand, shout, try and give you a quick answer, or we'll hold it to the end. And, with that, I say, welcome to the team. I look forward. So some of you may work by yourselves most of the time, but, for a lot of us, we work in teams, and building apps for us at Possible Mobile is a team sport. We work with developers and engineers and designers and testers and project managers and clients and all sorts of people, right? And it's sort of this ballet that, there's some chaos and there's some control, and we're trying to get to the end. And we work in teams because, teams give us something that we don't always get as individuals, right? It gives us different skills. It gives us a support network. It's really one of the only ways to scale, right? If we don't want to get something done in a year, we sort of need teams. And I'm sure a lot of you have been on awesome teams, and at the end I'd love to hear if there's things that you didn't see in our list, in my list. But I'm sure some of you have been on teams and you really wish that you weren't on the team and you sort of just felt like doing it yourself. So I'm excited today to maybe talk about some things that you can take away that I think are really important to good teams where people love to be on those teams and those teams create great things. So teams are complex adaptive systems. I use these words every day. It's just so easy to understand. And we're going to talk about what that is a little bit in a second. But in its formal definition, if you want to Google this, there's lots of stuff about it, right? So teams have people, and they have process, and they have rules, and they live in an environment. And the difference between a team and a simple process is, in a simple process, step 1 leads to step 2 leads to step 3. But in a team, it's sort of like atoms colliding, right? Like you hit a process, and the process makes you do things. 2 team members work together, and it causes a third to work in a different way. And so it's somewhat unpredictable. It's multivariate, right? There's all these variables. They're interacting all the time, and so it can be chaotic. And so a lot of the practices that are really important for teams are to help promote healthy outcomes, because it's really the systems around us that are the largest predictors of what happens and what the outcomes are. You can take the same person and put them in 3 different teams and 3 different organizations, and you might get different things that happen. It's not necessarily just the person, but it's how the person interacts with the rules and the process and the other team members. So it's really important to think about. So I'm going to stop saying complex adaptive systems, and I want to think about something that is a really practical example. So I really like games. Anybody else into tabletop games? Couple? Okay. So there's a really cool type of tabletop game, cooperative game. And so Forbidden Island, Pandemic, there's a couple different examples. And so in a cooperative game, you're on a team, and everybody is working with each other to beat the game, right? So there's a bunch of players, and there's rules you have to work within, and you can make different decisions, and you're trying to get the outcome you want, which is to. So it's really like a complex adaptive system where it's really about how you work together and decide to work together that makes you succeed or fail. And so not to think about what we do as a game, but I think it's a really cool model to think about that. You do have some say in how all this stuff works together, and it's like that kind of strategy sometimes when you're in a team. Thinking about how one thing is going to influence another thing. It's not 100 actions all by themselves. It's 100 actions that are going to have impacts on everything else. And so being thoughtful about how you work together as a team is important. So there's this really good quote I like. Don't look for bad people, look for bad systems. 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, when I meet people, they're good people and they're passionate and they want to do good things. And a lot of times they get stuck in a situation that doesn't bring out their skills or their passion or their motivation, or that causes them to do things they don't really want to do. And so, I like to help with this, but it's really everybody's responsibility to think about the system you live in and how you can change it to get what you want out of it. As we'll talk about a little bit later, hopefully you're on a team where you get to make some of the rules, and so you get to change the game to promote the outcomes you want. So I think that's exciting. For people that like to think about solving hard problems, this is a great hard problem to solve, right? It's an exciting thing. So I am a project manager, but I'm super passionate about helping individuals and teams to work in better systems. I want people to be motivated and excited and happy to be part of a team and to feel great about the work they're doing and to feel like they're learning and they have, some autonomy to just be themselves. So to help share some of this thing, I got all these things we're going to talk about, and I could probably talk about them forever, but it's important to focus, right? And so we're just going to talk about practices that are specific to teams. There's a lot of things that help people just by themselves work as a single individual. Today we're going to zone in on a couple things that sort of transcend that and matter more when there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people working together as one team. And so I hope by focusing in, you can pick some of these things that are most applicable to you and maybe take them home and maybe they help you out. So before we dive in, a couple disclaimers. I am not a magician. You may already know about some of these things. Hopefully you do. but I would ask you if you do these things. And I would ask, do you teach them to others? Often we know what we should do, but we don't do them. A lot of these things are common sense. I don't think it's like, why would you do that? Some of them are. But a lot of them require discipline, courage, and commitment to do them well. So I just asked today that, maybe your takeaway is you find something here that seems useful to you, and you can take it home and you can say to your team, hey, I really want to try this. Let's give it a try. Let's try it for 2 weeks. Let's see what happens. And I hope that, it brings you some benefit and happiness. So I'm going to talk through 4 areas, and in each area I'm going to talk through a couple practices that some of our teams at Possible Mobile use. Excuse me. There we go. Now my voice will be on there we go. Cool. I guess I was projecting. Yeah. So we're going to talk about 4 areas, and within each of those areas of practices, I've just picked a couple that I think are really important, and the focus area is meant to help everybody think about why do we care about doing this? What is the team getting out of it? What is the benefit, right? I'm always about the why, because if you can't give somebody a good why, then maybe you shouldn't do it, and it's just wasteful, and you should just stop it, because I hate doing things that don't make sense. So the first of those areas is purpose, right? So you have a team, and you have all these people, all these great people, but what are they doing, right? What's their struggle? What's their challenge? What are they trying to achieve? What is greatness? And so, having a purpose, having a true north, knowing what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve is so powerful. And it's really even more powerful when you're in a team, because you have all these different people that have very diverse backgrounds and different ways about thinking about stuff. And so how do you get everyone sort of trending in the same direction? So something that we often do, or do in pretty much all of our projects, is we try to have a single product owner. So for anyone that may not be familiar, a product owner is someone that is part of the team. Since we work with a lot of clients, we try and identify this person a lot of times in the client's organization, and they are the go-to person for the team to help them understand the business and the goals and the users. And I know it's a very popular concept, but it's a very powerful thing, having a single person to sort of aggregate stuff from the client and be a decision point and a clarification point for the team and be available to them. This person is in all of our team meetings. Our teams have stand-ups, and we have demos, and we have planning and retros, and we do those things, and we use chat a lot, and we hang out a lot, and the product owner is there in all that, right? And they help us answer, what is our true north, right? If we're trending a little that way, a little this way, they give us feedback. They help us keep our eyes on the goal, and make sure that we're doing something great as a team. And so, it seems like a very simple thing, but it can be a hard thing to do. It can be really hard to drive the concept and get that one person and this role established. And so I think some of our best teams have this role very clearly defined. And some of our, challenges on other teams come from the fact that there's all these voices and purpose is sort of diluted, and we don't really know where we're going. It makes your life a lot easier, right? You can negotiate and you can bring great ideas to this person, but at the end of the day, you have a single sounding board, and that's a pretty cool thing to have. Another thing that helps our teams with purpose is a ready backlog. Again, this is maybe pervasive in our industry. And for anyone that hasn't worked with a backlog, we basically think about all the things we want to do, in our case, in apps for users. We do a lot of sports apps, Possible Mobile. So maybe we want to let fans really zone in on the team they care about. Maybe they want some notifications when there's a close game, so they can, that's when they get excited. And so we think about all these things we want to do. We put them in a backlog. There's a couple things we do. We put them in order. We don't put them all as high priority or low priority. We stack rank them. So we say, this is 1, and this is 2, and this is 3. Again, it brings some focus and some purpose about what is most valuable. And it empowers the team to work on the next most valuable thing. And this may seem simple, but if you've ever been in a situation where you don't know what to do or what's next, or someone's, needs to make a decision, it can be sort of a bummer. There can be a lot of waste in there. You can sort of be like, hey, what are we doing? It's listless, you lose the focus and the purpose. And so really having a good chunk of what's next and what's valuable I think in a lot of cases really empowers teams to say, we're blocked on this one thing, but we're going to keep going. And it's really important for us to say a ready backlog. So, it's only fair that the team can be successful at these things. So for us, that means prioritize. It means estimate it so that product owner can say, hey, this is a week. Do I want to spend a week? And then all the things. And all the things is different for every team. But for a lot of our teams, that means that we've thought about the UX and the design. We've thought about if there's APIs to support it. We've thought about business rules or metrics we're trying to drive. And, it's never quite done. Like, we get into it and we talk about it and we work together as a team to think about how to make it even better. But, we want to make sure it's like ready enough that we're not just sort of pitching something over the fence that can't be done. So another area that's really important for teams is focus. So just like purpose, what's our true north, where are we going? There can be a lot of distractions, right? Like some of you right now maybe getting texts or emails or looking at other stuff. There's a lot that goes on in our world, and it's tough to zone in and stay focused. And so it's something that if you have focus, right, that's when you can get a lot of quality and you can get something right and you can really think about it. And it's a good thing to promote. So the way we help teams with that and the way our teams think about that, one of the things we do is we think about iterations. So, I like to think about an iteration of, hey, let's get our group from here to across the hallway, right? That's easy to think about. It's easy to plan. It's tangible. If I say, hey, let's get our team from here to France, right? It's a lot more complicated. You got to think about a lot more things. There's a lot more logistics. It may be overwhelming. You may just not want to do it and sort of shut down. So it's a very tangible thing. Our teams normally work in 1 to 2 week iterations. And the thing that does, which I don't know how much people think about, is it provides a rhythm for work. And so I like to think of a rhythm as if every day I know I'm going to hang out with the team at 9 and we're going to have a stand-up and we're going to chat about, what do we need to coordinate, what's going on with each other, any challenges we can help each other with. I can plan around that. I know what time I get up, I can have breakfast. I know I save some conversations for after that stand-up. I know I can do stuff in the afternoon because it's some time to focus. Versus, if anybody has ever had a calendar where, it's like, I have this meeting at 3:30 and this one at 3:45, but it's only this Tuesday, and someone asked for some time during my lunch, and it's crazy. And, the amount of effort it takes to deal with that interrupt-driven stuff is super expensive. Whereas if you have a rhythm, you get used to it. It's predictable. You find ways to work in it, right? It's like that gameplay where every time we go around the board once, something happens, right? You can plan against it. So that rhythm is super important. And I think the other part is, having something that ends based on time and doesn't end on scope, right? It says, at this point, we're going to demo no matter where we got. That's really powerful because, you're not going to work 80 hours to get to it. You're going to show where you are. You're going to make a decision about if you should continue or what you're going to do. Make sure you're aligned. Make sure you're still achieving the purpose. And you're going to move on. And that's super important for a team because, a team member has all these different people and they're sort of working on different stuff and they're sort of working together. So having those points to come back together and be a team and replan is super important. Something else that helps with focus on our teams, stop starting and start finishing. We have these Kanban boards for our teams, and we visualize our process. A lot of teams' processes are much bigger than ready and doing, and there's quite a few pieces. But we think about limiting our work in progress. So we say, let's not have somebody working on 6 things. Let's do something well, let's make sure it's right, and then let's move on to the next thing. Limiting work in progress can encourage team members to sort of swarm together and to help each other, right? If we agree that we're only going to work on 3 things with 4 or 5 people, then folks can help each other and have 2 eyes on it and 2 hands on it and sort of make sure it's done. And so make sure people are focused on it. And I know there's a lot of folks that may be great at multitasking. I am not one of them. I am horrible at multitasking. And a lot of times multitasking, we'll start 4, 5, 6 things, and those things will take like a week or 2 weeks, and they could have been done in a day. And so, if it was done in a day, we all could have looked at it and said, is this right? Is this awesome? Is this what we wanted? We could have moved on to the next thing. But if we have 6 things in progress at once, we get to the end and we're like, this is not great, but we're out of time. And so, if you think about really focusing and doing things incrementally, you have more chances to get it right. You have more chances to build on the success or the failure you just experienced into the next thing you do. So to do that, we often will look at what is in progress, and we'll talk about that first, right? Like, what pull requests are outstanding? Who's looking at this? Someone blocked. What can we do about this? What can we do to help get this tested and get it finished, right? Like, we want to finish stuff before we start more stuff. So stop starting and start finishing. And then the last thing that a lot of our teams think about to really focus is working on related things. So, I don't know if you've ever gotten that situation where it's like you're doing this and that and this and that, and it's all over the place, and it's just like a pile of tickets or it's a pile of stuff. And so we'll try and think about things in themes, right? We'll think about things that are related to each other. And that doesn't necessarily mean like there's 6 things on a view that are hanging out next to each other, but that may think about what's something common in a user experience. So like for us, theme A could be a collection of stuff, going back to my previous example, that helps a sports fan, appreciate their favorite team. It could be setting a favorite team in one place. It could be filtering another view for a favorite team. It could be getting some really exciting, interrupt-driven alerts or news in the app when something happens with your favorite team. But, it helps the team to reduce context switching. So you're not thinking about, favorite teams here and then, ads over here, sort of thinking about everything together. And it helps to create a cohesive user experience, right? We're thinking about all that stuff in context. How does the user go from this to that to that to this to this, right? And we can have a conversation about it, think about it together. We can architect it together. So it's it's another valuable thing. And that way, when it's sort of delivered, it's valuable. Not only help the team, but it helped the business and the user too, right? Because they're getting something cohesive that is going to make somebody happy and hopefully is releasable. So another area is very important to teams is synchronization and collaboration, right? So you have all of these different team members. They all have their own way of thinking, their own way of hearing, their own way of doing things, and that's great, right? The diversity is a good thing. But at the same time, these team members have to synchronize once in a while and say, are we on track? How can we support each other? And so one really interesting thing about teams is if everyone agreed with each other, it probably wouldn't be as valuable of a team. And so divergence is a great thing. I love it when teams disagree and diverge for a little bit. And so a really valuable team practice is to think about how do we let people diverge? How do we take advantage of that? If there's one person in the team that's normally going to shout out and say, this is the right answer, and no one else wants to say anything about it, that's not really healthy. Who wants to be on that team? So divergence is great to generate ideas and leverage the team's diversity and wisdom. So an example of this is, we recently had a client say we're making an internal social media app for them, and they said we want to help people see how we're all over the world. We have all these offices. We want our employees to understand this and connect with this and see how we're a global presence. And so we sat down as our team, and we weren't sure really how we're going to do this. Just gave everybody a bunch of paper, a bunch of markers, and we said, okay, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to show the global breadth of this company. We're trying to, the client mentioned maybe something about location. We're not sure. And so we said, okay, everybody gets 5 minutes. Draw your solution and then pitch it, right? You get 5 minutes to come up with it. You get 1 minute to pitch it. And so everybody did it, and then we shared, and then we said, okay, we'll steal ideas. You can take whatever you want from anybody, and you can take it and incorporate it into your idea, and we do it again, and we do it again. And so, we initially diverged. Some people's ideas were similar, some were very far off, and people started stealing things, and you started to see people gravitate towards good ideas. But we let people diverge, right? We let people go off before we came back together as a team, and then we had the product owner there too, and sort of decided how are we gonna do this? What are we gonna decide? Another really great example of divergence is for anybody that's ever been in a retrospective. Our teams will get together every couple of weeks, and we'll often talk about something on the themes of what was awesome, what was not, what should we do that we're not even talking about. And we'll often start those off by just having people brainstorm without talking, right? So they can't influence each other and just come up with those ideas, right? And that divergence is pretty cool because, like, if 6 people say the same thing without talking, then maybe it's a common theme. You may also get sort of things you would have never talked about that later on everybody wants to talk about because one person thought of it. So letting some divergence happen, or even letting different people pursue something in different ways and then making a decision about it, can be a valuable thing. And in the end, making sure you come back together and are synchronized. Another thing we do around synchronization. So as I said earlier, we visualize our process. We have boards for every team, and we visualize the status of things and who's assigned to, and they're not these lovely white little blobs. They have pictures and names and all sorts of symbols on them. We happen to use Jira, if anybody uses Jira. And the thing I think that's important to appreciate about this is, it's really easy to see some things. It's really easy to see bottlenecks. I had a team the other day, we had a retrospective, and we had a column where the client reviewed stuff and accepted stuff, and there were like dozens of things in there. The whole team challenged that person, and they were like, what's going on? Like, this is crazy. Like, we've talked about this before. You're not getting through your stuff. And we talked about it at our retrospective. And I came in today and it was empty. In that case, it wasn't really a problem other than the person wasn't giving it time. But the team saw it, they called it out, and we got it solved. Stagnation too, right? In a lot of our boards, we'll see how long something's been hanging out there. If we've been working on something for 3, 4, 5 days, how can we help that thing along? How can we be a team and say, what do you need? Do you need to pair up? Are you blocked by something? What's going on? Do we need to have a conversation? It's not targeting that person. It's really just as a team saying, we need to redirect our energy here to help this person so we are successful at winning the game. And just status, right? It's really easy to sort of see where things are. I would say, beyond just this, there's lots of visualizations. We had one team in the office that recently hung up their whole flow on the wall. I do that with a lot of teams too, and just ways to visualize stuff so you can have a conversation that's more than just words. And so one of the last big things in synchronization may seem pretty common sensey, but being together. So for some of our teams that are around for a long time and are pretty big, they sit together, right? They hang out together. They're in the same pod at the same desk. And you can see each other and hear each other. It's really easy to roll over to another chair or walk over to someone else's desk and chat as a team. There's this really fancy thing I love. I don't know who came up with it, but I don't know of another term. So osmotic communication, right? I hear 2 people over there talking about push notifications, and I just was working on something about push notifications, and I can hear them, and I can self-identify that I want to participate in that conversation. I was hanging out by a team the other day, and there's a team in a pod next to me, and I saw two developers talking across their desks, and then the one walked over and they started looking at something on the screen. I look back up 2 minutes later, and there's 3, and then there's 4, and the whole team's standing there, and they're agreeing on how to do something, right? You can do that in a chat tool. It is hard. You can do that on a telephone. It is hard. So when I see team members, sitting together or on Hangouts or other screen sharing tools, I think sometimes people feel we don't need to do that. You should do it. It's worth it. It is worth it. Pairing, we do not pair all the time. And we also don't just pair as developers. Right? I've paired doing all sorts of stuff. I've paired doing testing. I've paired grooming backlogs. I've paired doing all sorts of stuff. And so, getting together with someone and seeing it together and working through it together is a very valuable thing. And again, I think this is something where not everyone wants to do it, but it can be valuable. So if you think it's the right thing in a situation, have the courage to try it out and see if it works. Maybe it doesn't in that situation. Maybe it does. And so the last big focus area for teams, inspecting and adapting. This is my favorite area because it's you get to change the rules. You don't just have to play the game. You get to make up the game. And I think that if that's something that you get to do as an individual and on a team, then that's an awesome responsibility, right? You get to figure out the best way to do stuff. You get to optimize stuff. Like, that's pretty fun. So really key to that is quick feedback cycles. And this is such a huge concept. It underlays so many things that a lot of teams do. And the idea is, if you can make feedback real time, it's like nothing, right? It's like a conversation. It's like, how big a deal is feedback if you're working on something and you ask the guy next to you for some feedback? It's like not a big deal normally. It's quick. You can do something with it. You cannot do something with it, And then if you get the feedback like in a day, it's like, well, I might have to stop what I'm doing and go back to it. If you get the feedback in a week, it might be like, oh, well, we got to submit a bug and like prioritize it and estimate it and think about it and manage it. And so there's a lot of old school graphs and studies about the cost of a bug, but I like to think about it like that. It's just like it consumes your life. Like, you just want to get rid of it. If there's feedback, you want to get it as quickly as you can, so it's really easy to deal with. And so some of the ways we get feedback is we have a daily stand-up, right? We share what's going on, and a lot of times there'll be a question about like, what do you think about this? Or can we look at this after stand-up real quick? Or, it's just a good opportunity to communicate and get the feedback. Chat, like I'll be in a chat room and it'd be like, and a video will pop in and it'll be like, what do you think about this? Is this what we're trying to do? Or, I'll chat and I'll be like 3 lines in, I'll be like chat, and be like, okay, we're going to go walk over and pair up, right? We're going to hang out together and have a richer discussion about this. Builds and demos. So everything in our backlog at the end gets a PR. The PR gets merged. Jenkins builds it. Jenkins is happy 95% of the time. Goes into Vend, which is our app distribution system. And we look at those builds, right? I love to come in the morning, I get my coffee, get my breakfast, I download my builds, I check it out. Right? I'm like, what did we do yesterday? Our clients do that too. Like, some of our best product owners do that each day, right? They're like, hey, I looked at all this stuff. They do it before the stand-up. They give us feedback. It's a great way to make sure people are seeing what is actually happening and not just talking about it. And then retrospectives, right? I hope that team members are improving stuff every day. I hope we get to retrospectives and everybody's like, hey, we dealt with everything. But that doesn't always happen. So it's a good pause to say, like, if there's anything we didn't already improve or deal with in the last iteration, let's talk about it now. Let's try and improve a couple things. And let's change the rules of the game. And let's see if we can be a better game, play a better game and win. And going along with feedback, seeing is understanding. Some people are not as visual as I am. I am a super visual person. I think it's a super rich way to communicate. I don't know how many times I read a ticket or people told me words and then I saw it and it clicked. So whether it's hanging up comps on a wall or making sure that builds and demos are very available and viewed by everyone, or pairing to understand things and build empathy, seeing is believing. And I love just, in a conversation saying, don't tell me, show me, right? And I've learned so many things by seeing it, things I probably shouldn't know as a project manager. Like, I sync all of our repos and I build stuff locally and I know how to use Charles Proxy, and all this stuff, right? But I learned it by seeing other people do it. And I have a lot more empathy and understanding. And when someone says like, hey, this is a challenge, I'm like, I know, I saw it, and I can really explain it to someone. And then when I'm trying to explain it to someone, I say, let's show it to them, right? So I'd very much encourage you to communicate richly and share pictures and all sorts of other things with your team members and with others. And so the last thing in inspect and adapt, we just got a ping pong table. We just got a new floor in our building. We used to only have foosball and darts, but I love ping pong, so I chose ping pong here. Play ping pong and eat lunch. So we can often be very busy, right? And part of being a team is being cohesive and having fun and enjoying each other's company. So taking the time to have fun and enjoy each other, hanging out and building understanding, empathy, and camaraderie. And I would actually argue that, there's a lot of things that are probably solved over a ping pong table or over a lunch together, because your mind is in a different place. Your thoughts are happening in a different way, and it's important to be in a team, right? You got to have fun and you got to enjoy each other too. So, and with that, I know we're actually coming close to lunch, which I hear we get food truck vouchers today, so that's pretty exciting. So those are a few thoughts on what make really awesome teams and how we work at Possible Mobile. And so I hope that you can take something from that back to what you do and apply it. Or if you've already tried that, maybe stand up for it and try it again. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or have any discussion. But otherwise, I appreciate everyone coming.
What kind of an approach would you recommend when clients aren't really acting as team players?
When clients aren't really acting as team players, what does that mean?
If they're being difficult or not, if they're not giving feedback in a timely fashion, or if they're changing requirements on you, or if they're, pushing for, pushing back against recommendations that you as experts are making, just kind of like acting as an impediment to progress.
Sure. Well, I guess one thing I'd ask is, we talked about like the product owner way at the beginning. I mean, the assumption is like they want something valuable out of it and they're helping to provide direction to that. A lot of this stuff requires your clients to sort of be on board about it. And a lot of times we spend quite a bit of time with our clients talking about the way we work and why we think it's productive and what it's going to mean to them. I mean, a product owner, we're asking someone to be very involved with the team. And, we'll say it's going to take at least half of your time, if not more, right? Like, that's like half your job. Like, this is not somebody that already has 125% of stuff on their plate. So, I think it's probably really helpful to, like, set expectations up front and have those conversations and see if, you can sort of get people to say, like, yeah, we'll try it. And then, if you have challenges along the way, I guess you got to have difficult conversations and maybe try and deal with it. But setting yourself up for success at the beginning, I think is really important to work in this way.
So how do you handle distributed development teams? What I mean by that is Possible Mobile's growing.
Mm-hmm.
You've got branch offices somewhere else. And
Yep.
How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, so we work with our clients are all over the place. We have clients in East Coast, West Coast, in Atlanta. We have offices in Costa Rica, and LA, and New York, and all around the globe. I think we try and just keep a lot of the communication channels really rich. Like every meeting is going to have a Google Hangout. Every meeting is going to have a backup dial-up. We have video conferencing stuff in all the rooms. I think chat is a fun way to like stay in touch with each other. And in certain situations, we'll have people get together. Like we'll actually fly people together to meet at a client site. Or like if we're going to kick off a big release or a big something, we'll get together and we'll do it in person. So I think that's certainly one way. I mean, it certainly can be a challenging thing, but I think by doing that and still having things like chat or just hanging out from time to time, it helps build some of that empathy and that team cohesion. Sometimes when we're having a big app ship too, we'll just have like a ship it room and we'll get a room for a couple days. And there's times when we've almost just had like persistent sort of video, like team members are just sort of plugged in, dialed in, sort of hanging out, if you will. So it's hard, but at the same time, it helps us serve our clients too, right? Because like our clients are all over, and so being closer to them helps us serve them as well. Did I see one back here?
Yeah. So if you're like trying to some new technique on a team or something like that, do you have any way to like measure the success of that? Is it obvious, or is there like some kind of metric?
I just ask everyone to draw either a happy face or a sad face and let me know how they think it is. That's actually probably a good idea, though. I mean, that's a good metric. But so there are some things we look at. Some of our teams are Scrum teams, and some of our teams are Kanban teams. For Scrum teams, I mean, I think those teams are looking at did they meet their commitment, and how much can they plan, and then they're increasing the velocity. If they could get 10 things done before in 3 months, are they getting 12 or 15 things done? For some of our other teams, though, we have some Kanban teams, and so for anybody that isn't familiar, it's really about trying to flow your work through a process and optimize that process and try and get the most efficient, effective process you can for the process you control. And for those teams, we can look at our time and process. So we'll look at like for each section of that and as a whole, like how long does it normally take us through to get the average thing through? Is it 2 days? Is it 5 days? Is it 10 weeks? And it's a great place to spot bottlenecks because a lot of times what we'll see is like, well, it takes us 3 days, but 2 days of it was testing or 2 days of it was accepting. And so it's a way for us to zone in and sort of say like, okay, let's zero in on this part of the process, talk about it as a team and figure out what do we want to tweak to try and get it to change. And so, on my particular teams, I've had cases both with getting stuff ready for the team, for testing stuff and for accepting stuff where we've, in 3 separate instances, used that as a tool to zero in and then make some changes and then measure it over time to see if that goes back down, right? So I think those are some of the things we measure. Sure. So it depends. So we have some apps where we've built them and we're just doing a little bit of maintenance, and the smaller teams will normally look like there'll be an architect that's always serving that client and a project manager that's always serving that client and an account director. Sometimes the developers and the testers on those projects will change a little bit, but for a lot of our large teams where we're building a new product or revamping a product or working on a product 12 months a year, years at a time doing regular releases, it'll normally be somewhere up to maybe like 6 or 7 devs. There'll normally be a mobile architect. There'll normally be a production designer and a design lead. There'll normally be a project manager and an account director. So, our core teams are probably 10 or less in most of our situations, and we generally, that's about as big as we'd probably get before we said maybe we need another team. Maybe we need to scale out. Because, after you get past so many people, it just becomes infinitely more challenging to communicate, to synchronize, and to work together as a team. That's a good question.
So what I heard was a little bit of a happy path through the process. What are the things of your lessons learned and things that you wish you could go back and fix, wouldn't do again, those type of things?
I think it's, something that that I always struggle with is how to, I don't know if this is exactly addressing your question, but like making this really something that the team owns, right? Making the team own the process, making the team have ownership of, tweaking it and controlling it. When we're forming a new team, or if we have new folks, we sort of say, well, this is how we work, and we should try it until we're at a place where it's safe to change all the rules. And it can be a tricky transition to then say, okay, everyone's at the level where like you should be changing your rules and try and transition everyone to thinking like that. I think it's sort of like a form of empowerment, right? Like at some point, it's safe, and for folks to decide how they're going to work together and own that. And I take a step back in that kind of situation. But you really have to have a lot of team cohesion and engagement to think about that and ask questions like, how are we going to measure our success? How are we going to know if this is a good thing? How are we going to know if this is a bad thing? So that's something I often wish that maybe I took the leap of faith on a little bit sooner. Yeah, good question. All right. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Can you maybe explain more on why you choose to go Kanban or Agile for a particular team?
Yeah, so I can talk about some experiences with it. So I think a lot of times when we'll use Scrum in a project, a client has a very they have a vision for where they want to get. Might be a new product or a big new release. They're going to work well in thinking about a roadmap and incrementally delivering things, and they're going to be able to work with us to get stuff ready incrementally and have a plan. So it works well in that situation. Not that everything goes perfectly, because we are replanning and we are thinking about how we do things, but we can prepare things, we can have them ready, and we can sort of cycle through that as Scrum works. A lot of the places, I'd say that's where we start out with almost all of our projects, but we've transitioned some to Kanban, And in those situations, it's sometimes environments where there's not that kind of environment outside of our team. It's more chaotic. We're not sure exactly what's going to come in. We don't have a roadmap that's 3 to 6 months out. It's a little bit more last-minute decisions. And that could be because, our client has a big organization and that's how their organizational structure works, and they can't necessarily do it either, and it's a frustration. Kanban's used a lot in operational environments too, where there's interrupt-driven work where you don't know what's going to happen. You just need to do the best job you can with it. And so I think in some of those examples, it's sort of like, our commitment with our client, we want it to be, we're going to do the best job we can once we know about something. You say, there's all these things, you tell us what's most important, help keep us focused, but, we'll try and optimize our process to deal with that situation. And instead of saying, we're going to sit down and plan out the next 2 weeks or the next 2 months because we can, we're going to put in mechanisms where, we continually ask, what's the next most valuable thing? What's the next most valuable thing? And we do the best job we can within our process to deal with it. So for us, I think it's largely been a driver of what our clients' environments are like and what's going to be most successful for them, because asking someone, we need a 6-month roadmap, and we can't do that. That's not going to lead to success. So it's really about what kind of outcome we're trying to get for our clients, I think.
Some of the things that you point out that will make a team work well might be at odds with what might make a developer work well, like focus and isolated time. So have you had to address that in your teams where maybe you're taking the team aspect of it too far? Too many groupings, too much co-location. Whereas you might be building a complicated thing, what you really need is to set people aside and let them be on it for more than 2 days, maybe 5 days or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of trying to personally not interrupt people. I will often think let me try and have this conversation right after stand-up, because that would be a better time to have it and maybe not disrupt somebody. And then everybody gets really nice headphones and just tunes everyone out in the world. It's a really good question. We just moved to a second floor, and so there's half the people in our office now, and it's a lot quieter. And I thought of that the other day. I was like, wow, it's quieter. Can I focus more? So I don't know if I have a strong perspective. I guess I'd be interested to hear what other people had to say about it. Uh-oh, I got the big 0. I'm out of time. So I don't know that I have a perfect answer. It's something that's on my mind, and I'd love to take it to the team and ask them. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.